if somebody hands you their best, and the first thing you're thinking about are the three things that you would do to make it better, then that strength doesn't feel like a strength.
Oneka Cornelius, it is absolutely a pleasure to get to spend some time with you today, and I'm really grateful for you making time and opening yourself up to connect with me today. Thanks for coming.
Oh, you're welcome, Matt. Thank you for having me. This is really cool. I think we're going to have a good time.
Oh, I can tell. I mean, we had such a good time just setting up all the audio and everything, so it's all good from here. Now, you are in Atlanta. I'm in Tokyo, so just to orient us and everybody else about where we are, which is cool. We might not be able to fly long distances, but we can still connect.
Technology is amazing when it all works and hums and sings together. So it's really cool that I'm getting a chance to literally look at you while we're doing this.
I know. It's very cool. So I remember first seeing and hearing you, and it's not just seeing and hearing you, it was really feeling your energy. That's the unforgettable thing. I remember some of the content, but it was your energy that captivated me. And that was at the OD Network Conference in Atlanta in 2016?
That would have been 2016. It would have been October 2016, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like 4 years ago, man.
Yikes.
It's bananas. Wow.
It was cool. So you were there with your boss at the time at Coca-Cola Company.
Yeah.
Or was it Coca-Cola Enterprises?
It was, so it's considered Coca-Cola.
Okay.
Yeah, I was there with my then people leader. Her name was Mona Kelly, who I consider one of the most amazing leaders that I've had the opportunity to serve and partner with, who was invited to, come to OD Network and be a keynote speaker. And so much of the work that we were doing was intertwined as we took Coca-Cola on this journey that was transformative, that was going to, as we both said, I think that day, work ourselves out of jobs if we did it right. But understanding that it was really taking the company and some very senior leaders on change journeys they had not been on. And the person that she was like, I could come and tell your story, but I'd much rather share the platform and let you tell the story.
So she could have had the whole stage to herself. And
she could have had the entire stage. She could have told the story. But, as amazing leaders do, they are not threatened by sharing and providing access. And she graciously did so and shared that time with me.
So you were on stage with Mona. Mona was, so just a little context. If I recall right, you were there talking about a major change management initiative. You said you were working yourself out of a job. And the reason was, and help me remember this context, it was something about essentially a huge piece of Coca-Cola being carved off and being sent off to become a separate entity. And a major bottler?
And actually separate entities, yeah. So if you think about how restaurants, fast food, casual food, how they have a franchise model. Yeah. So what Coca-Cola parent company decided to do was to actually break up and sell different parts of its bottling operations regionally to different local bottlers across the United States and Canada. And so while in the past they actually owned all of their manufacturing, all of their sales and distribution, they were going to move to a localized model so that those local bottlers could focus on those regional brands that most resonated, had highest value, highest brand recognition in a more localized market. And so my client was the senior vice president of Coca-Cola Refreshments at the time. So he owned all the manufacturing across not just what we call sparkling. So if you think carbonated beverages, as well as juice and tea and water, he literally owned all of those portfolios. And they were moving to start to regionalize and refranchise all of sparkling or carbonated. And Coca-Cola was also going to be bringing coffee, tea, and juice and water and keep that within. So huge endeavor, probably better part of 2 years. And, Mona and I sitting in different places and working with different sets of leaders, worked really closely with them around how they thought about their plan, how they thought about how they were going to transition associates, how they were going to work with not just casting, but also articulating and creating the vision and the communication strategy. How do you tell this story? And in many instances, different parts of the business were going to be owned by different bottlers that were not known very far in advance. And so, you're telling the future of what it's going to look like, but you don't know who's going to own what part, what region, what area, what state or states. And so there were just a lot of different pieces that weren't going to be ironed out until literally right before deals were made, right? And so, again, anytime you have such huge transformation and such huge people impacts, but also so much ambiguity and so many different holes and blank areas in communication. Just by our nature as human beings, we get antsy in that space, right?
Yeah.
Our natural inclination is to ask why.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be really, really clear about why and what and how and when and who. And we didn't always have those answers. And so we had to be really clear about what it meant to share what we know as it is today, with the understanding that it will be ever changing. I don't feel like it's very different than what we're all experiencing globally right now. Not nearly as severe, okay? Recognizing that, business, refranchising parts of its business is not nearly as impactful or severe as, what we're seeing in terms of health crises and things of that nature. But when you think of not knowing what's going to happen and how do you communicate that and how do you do that regularly so that people are informed, and then how do you add more context, how do you add more detail, so you think about the complexity in that way. So that was a lot of the story that we were telling.
You mentioned the word fear, and you made the parallel to the connection with what's going on right now in the world and the fear of transition. And there's a lot of research now not coming out, but being published in sort of popular sources about the impact of having no certainty on the psyche, that how bad that is. And of course, that's at the heart of any kind of corporate change management, is people want certainty, and you can't get, as you said, you can't always give it to them, and you got to be straightforward. I think you and Mona talked about this on the stage, that you have to be straightforward even when you don't have answers, that you don't have answers.
And that you honor people by telling them the truth, which I think a lot of times, and this isn't specific to that change that I was leading. I think sometimes corporate speak, we err on the side of, jargon and lots of generalizations, and that doesn't meet people where they are. As a matter of fact, it leaves them leaves them open to much more personal interpretation. And what I would always tell leaders who weren't sure, well, what do we say? I said, well, just tell them that there are no updates right now. Tell them that we don't know what's coming next. Tell them that, decisions have been delayed. And I think sometimes people err on the side of silence. And what I would tell leaders is understand that your silence is still telling a story, but what you're now doing is you're leaving people to make up the story on their own. And once an individual has made up a story of their own, you're constantly chasing that. And you don't know, right, if you ever rewrite or overwrite that belief. And it's one thing to always clarify the story that you've communicated. It's another when you're having to deal with somebody's personal story that they've set up and told themselves.
Right.
And so, and I don't know that you can ever always get in front of that. So it was just really helping people to think about communication much more openly and much more simple. Let's keep the language simple. I think we talked about that as well, that you can tell a powerful story that is engaging and meaningful, and it's not filled with a lot of platitudes. You can just tell people, here's where we are, and people will appreciate and respect that. And so we got a chance to walk with that.
I got to imagine that in the period of time you're working on this thing, where people are afraid of losing their jobs and they're it's a threat to something pretty fundamental, which is my income and my career and, my ability to support my family and myself. Were there any moments along the way where it just felt like you weren't going to be able to endure what you were doing? Did you ever wake up going, maybe I should just walk away from this initiative? Or any low moments like that?
There were definitely low moments. Once we got to the point in that body of work where we had equipped all the leaders, they were prepared, and we knew that they were getting ready to start having individual people and team conversations, that was difficult. But I purposed to be there every day because, and what I would share with our leaders, and if you're familiar with change management, whether that's William Bridges curve, whether it's the Kubler-Ross curve, whether it's the John Kotter curve around change, there's always a point where you've been involved in it so long that you've moved on. You're in that new place. And for leaders we had been doing this work with for months and months, better part of a year before we were ever having any communications at the people level, you've been with it so long, you're ready to move on. And I remember being with some leaders and saying, I get that this feels like the end for you, and you've been sitting with this, you're ready to go ahead and just tell people, and you're ready to start getting to what's next, but understand that the end for you is the beginning for everybody else. This is day zero for everyone. And you're getting ready to tell people that livelihoods are changing, or they don't have opportunities, or people that may have been with this organization for decades aren't going to be with the organization anymore, potentially. Mm-hmm. And so you have to honor the space of that conversation. And at that point, it's not about you, it's about them. And so just making sure that they had space, that they took time, that they weren't, and we didn't have any leaders that, were totally egregious. It was just one of those things where just keep the sensitivity top of mind.
Yeah.
Because you never know the state of the person, what they're dealing with before they come into the room. You never know. You never know what they're carrying into the room with them, into the situation with them. And so even though you don't have that information, you have to honor it and trust that there's something there. And so it gives you a different respect, and you handle those kinds of conversations soberly and intentionally and humbly, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. And you got to give people room to digest life-changing information.
Yeah. And everybody digests it in their own way with their own.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. And so that's the other side of it, right? We had to also prepare them. Here's your security briefing. Should this get out of hand? You may have somebody that is very emotional. Yeah. Here are, psychology resources. Here are EAP program resources. How do you give them space? How do you allow the words to settle and give people a moment before you sort of, ding the bell and go next? You have to really, you have to really take a moment, and then even after you're having those conversations, you have to give yourself a moment to almost hit the reset button. Mm-hmm. Because you're in the emotional moment with an individual. Yeah. Right? And so if you're intentional about it, and if you care and you're sympathetic and or empathetic, then you've got to decompress from that as well. It's not something where you're just sort of rolling through these events. That's not healthy either. Yeah. So yeah.
Wow, it sounds like quite an experience. Now, just professionally, you're an OD specialist, your change management. Just what's the elevator pitch on your? we didn't even start with that. We jumped right in. So, tell us about your consulting firm.
This is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, gosh, I'd probably say in early 2019, as I was going through another one of those moments where I'm like, okay, well, this is what I think I'm going to be when I grow up. I decided to hang out my single shingle, and the name that I chose was Convergent Solutions. I had been in consulting with one of the big five firms for close to a decade, and had cut my teeth in management consulting and loved that work. It was an amazing experience, amazing relationships and clients, and just solving big, hairy problems, and always loved that work. I think I was always wired for it. because it gave me the variety and the ability to have multiple experiences as part of this one part of my career. And I knew that I wanted to go back to it, but I'm a firm believer that really, really good and amazing consultants, at some point you have to go back and do another tour of duty in industry. So, if I think back to my time at Coca-Cola and some other organizations when I came back into industry, it's because I didn't want it to be consulting in theory. I wanted to make sure that the solutions that I was sharing and recommending to clients still resonated. Did it address issues they were having today, not issues they were having in the past? Mm. And so, knowing that I love that side of it, I thought I'd explore doing some of that work individually. And so, out of that, convergence was born. Convergence is a word that is near and dear to me because I've used it in work that I've done in faith-based work, in ministry and things of that nature. And that's because at the end of the day, convergence is about bringing parts of your life, parts of your world, parts of your walk together. Mm-hmm. Because there is a synergy and an interdependence about who we are and how we're designed, that it all comes together and we're supposed to operate as complete beings. And so convergence was always about the fact that the work that I do around people, it isn't just about change or journey management. It isn't just about learning. It isn't just about workforce transformation or communications and HR transformation or org effectiveness. The fact of the matter is all of these different capabilities and disciplines, they are interdependent. You mm-hmm. can do them separately, you can do them in a siloed way, but you never get the holistic synergy that comes when you do them and you think of them holistically mm-hmm. as an ecosystem versus these separate processes and disciplines. And so helping clients see that. And so that really came from, work that I've done in the past where, a client or maybe even working in industry or in an organization, they may be coming to me to talk about change management, but the side of me that's also thinking about performance and hiring and selection and talent strategy, that frames and informs everything that I'm talking about with them,
right?
As it relates to the change. And so there would be these aha moments, and I said, well, that's still connected to how you think about learning. It's still connected to how effective your organization is. Leadership is connected to team health. And so talking in that language and not just change management for the sake of the practical and tactical execution, which is all good stuff, all very necessary, but starting to talk about the language of change leadership and change sustainability. Because at the end of the day, nothing gets done if you don't have leadership that's on board. And nothing stays in its new state unless you're thinking about what happens after.
Yes.
And so that framed a lot of my language. And so whenever I would talk with clients, I'm like, tell me how you're thinking about what happens after the transformation. What do you look like? What's going to ensure that these systems stay in place? What does the organization look like that's going to sustain this new behavior? Mm-hmm. And so there would be these looks that I would get.
Oh, we hadn't that far ahead.
You're absolutely right. And so it allowed me to call the question. And so, I'm usually the one in the room that asks questions and helps leaders to connect dots that they didn't necessarily see that were related. And so when those things come together, you achieve convergence. And so that's where that came from for me.
Love it. Oh, well, thanks for the explanation of the name. You said something. I want to pick up on the thread of this, which was that you felt like you were always wired for this work and helping other people. I mean, tell us more about that. How were you wired, and what experiences really, and maybe people, have informed the direction of what you've done professionally. Definitely. And also personally, because it sounds like you're working in faith-based communities on other initiatives and things too. So, yeah.
For sure. Yeah. It's a great question, Matt. When I think about it, what informed how I have always been a teacher. And I laugh because I remember thinking, I've been, if I think about where my journey has taken me, it really started years ago, right? When I started in training and learning and doing that type of work in financial services. And, this was probably late 90s. And I think probably my first, I'm a New York City girl, born and raised, but I'm a suburban mom now. But I was probably one of the first people that I knew of just in my age group and my colleagues and my peers. When I was 19, I was working at the Industrial Bank of Japan in foreign currency.
You're kidding me.
And yeah, so I spent those early years because I was good at math. Believe it or not, I think I remember saying when I was younger, "Oh, I want to be a mathematician." Had no idea what that was. No idea at all. But I was good at it. I was.
It was a strength, so you liked it. Yeah.
But it was a strength. It was a
Yeah.
strength, and so I laughed because my career. I don't even know that I would call it a career. I think I was just sort of stumbling through it like everybody else. But as a teenager, I wasn't. I was blessed. I wasn't working necessarily fast food and things of that nature. My mom had a friend who needed an administrative assistant, and so I actually helped her stand up her business. I was working in her home while she was, doing her day job, but I was running her temp agency out of her home and doing payroll and hiring people. I was 16 and a half.
Kidding.
And
that's crazy.
yeah, so that's how my my parentheses career started. And then I worked at a number of banks down on Wall Street, and investment banks, and in foreign currency, and with investment accounts, and doing all of this work in banking and financial operations when I was really young, and literally ended up at the Industrial Bank of Japan, right off Park Avenue, just like, handling Japanese yen trades during the day.
Just paint the picture here of how that happened.
How did that happen?
I'm trying to imagine who you met. What were the conversations and the connections that led to? Yeah.
I would love to tell you that there is rhyme and rhythm and clarity to that. It was really, at that time, this was the 80s. It was like you apply for a job,
wild.
It's in the New York Times, and you go to a temp firm, or you go to a placement firm, and you take aptitude tests, and they place you, and you interview, and if you get it, you get it. And so I was blessed. And so it gave me exposure to different areas within financial services. And over time, I wound up working here once I moved to Atlanta with a huge bank. And I was in operations, and I was in associate development. So that, I would say, is probably my entry into more of the human capital spaces. And I had a people leader, and you'll start to get the common thread of the people that have been, really intentional in my life. I had a manager. I came in for the interview. I'll never forget it. I was ridiculously rough around the edges. I was young and went to these interviews, and again, knew enough about banking operations that she decided to give me a shot. And so I was in associate development. I was working with learning coaches. I started writing learning content. I was doing process design. I was doing technical writing. I actually got bit by the bug. This was literally, I want to say 96, 97. So there was no internet.
Right. Right.
But got bitten by the technology and the computer bug, and started, designing computer learning centers for operations staff, and ways for them to get internal certifications on personal computing software. And it was really, I was on a learning curve with them.
Right.
But I loved it. And this same leader, I literally watched her one day. I was helping her prep for a leadership development course she was teaching. And you know how you have that moment. And I saw her facilitating, and I'm like, I want to do that. And to this day, she and I are the best of friends. Our families are close. We have walked personal journeys as well as professional journeys together. But I'll be the first person to say that when we talk about what influenced the leadership style that I have, it's the desire to always find a diamond in the rough and pour into them, because that's what was done for me. And so, we talked a little bit earlier, right? What does that look like as a Black woman, right? The people that have poured into me, I have mentors that are white males that have taken me under their wings and guided me. I have a mentor that I had when I was at the management consulting firm that I was with that I still talk to at least every other month, at least once a quarter. And this was, we've known each other the better part of 15 years. And he was the first senior manager I ever worked with when I was in consulting, who literally on day one said, okay, I'm not concerned about you doing the work, but I want you to read the contract to know what you're worth. There's what we pay you, and there's what we're charging clients for your time and for your expertise. And you need to know the difference. You need to understand the terms and conditions. You need to understand how we structured this deal.
Wow.
And, you know, that's priceless.
Yeah.
When somebody,
wait, how old were
shepherds
you?
you through.
Wait, maybe I'm missing the timeline. How old were you when
Yeah.
you had this experience? I mean, that's phenomenal.
In management consulting, gosh,
Yeah.
this would have been 2005. So about
Okay.
15 plus years ago.
15 years ago. Okay.
15 years ago, yeah. And so, you know, I talk about, you know, these people, and I think I jumped a bit. So, you know,
Yeah,
the person
sorry, I
that
was imagining you was
in my
16,
life.
like you
And then
started
I
when
was
you're.
just-
I'm like, if I remember when I
Yeah.
was 16, if the owner, if someone like that came in and said, "All right, I'm going to give you the inside scoop," my mind would have been blown. But
Yeah, well, you
Yeah.
know, if you think about it, so again, if we go back to when I was 16 and I was helping my mom's friend run her business out of her home, it was that level of crash course development. It was, okay, I need you to type these 10 letters. I need you to communicate with these vendors. I need these invoices to go out. I need you to handle accounts payable. I need you to go to the bank. You know, we've gotten these checks in from clients. I need you to handle payroll. I was 16 and a half.
wow.
And so, you know, a lot of my experiences have been where I've been thrown into the fire, where I've been expected to tread water and to learn, and I learned well in those environments. So they always work well for me. I know that they may not necessarily work well for everybody.
You started so young doing really adult things and being in an adult working world and facing all kinds of things. So, I mean, most people have a voice inside of them that sometimes isn't kind. You know, the one that says, you can't do this, or you're not, this isn't, you know, that doubt, the self-doubt, right?
For sure.
Along the way, I got to imagine all along the way, as you're doing all these new things in unfamiliar environments, that you had those thoughts. And I'm wondering what you've learned over the years, because you clearly have worked through them. So what have you picked up along the way in terms of when those voices come in? How do you overcome that? How do you step through that and get to the other side?
Yeah, good question. In full transparency, I'm still a work in progress. I am still a work in progress. The first thing you have to do is realize that the negative self-talk exists, right? I think, and this is anybody, just in our humanity, I don't know that anybody thinks that they have it all together. Maybe some people do. I just never did. But
Yeah.
my goal was always to be better or best. Part of when we talk about wiring, you know, one of the things that I remember when I had the chance to do StrengthsFinder years ago, I remember it showed and it defined one of my top 5 as being a maximizer. And I remember thinking, well, that's an odd word. But a maximizer is you know, if you have a maximizer strength, you're the type of person that is always looking to make something better. Even if something is good, you want to move the needle to make it great. And so that was awesome for me, because I now had language. I now had context for why I was wired the way that I was. You know, that I would see something and I'm automatically thinking of 5 ways to make it better or to do it differently. Sometimes it was a major tweak, sometimes it was a minor tweak. But it's just the way that I look at things. And I had to learn through that, because the flip side of being a maximizer and always looking at how to make something better, the flip side of it is I remember going through that situation and having a conversation with myself going, okay, that's great. Always being able, you know, if we just tweak this, it gets better. And I had to sit in that as a parent one day and go, so how does it feel?
You're reading my mind. This is what I wanted to ask you.
When, you know, kid A brings you this and you're like, that is amazing. But if we just do, and I remember feeling really convicted. I remember thinking, you know, what works really, really great in terms of work and how I'm wired to see things. I've got to apply this with a level of grace to people that I love or that love me, because if somebody hands you their best,
Mm-hmm.
and the first thing you're thinking about are the 3 things that you would do to make it better, then that strength doesn't feel like a strength. And I remember looking at it through my kids' eyes. You know, I have an older girl who I think she probably felt like, you know what, I can't get anything right with her.
Right.
And so I had to go back and I had to repent for that. I'm like, you know what, I'm sorry that my lens of always making something better, which can and should be a good thing, didn't always feel good for you. And so it gave me a level of sensitivity, even with people that, you know, are on my team or that I'm developing or that I'm coaching. It's like, when somebody gives you their best, accept that in grace. It doesn't matter the 2 or 3 things that you would do to make it different or to make it better. If somebody gives you their best, receive it as their best. You know. So.
Tell me about that. What is it? I like I like both phrases, but you said accept it with grace, I think is what you said. Mm-hmm. When someone gives you their best, accept that with grace.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
You know, it looks like saying thank you, and that thank you being real, and it being honest, and it not being a thank you, I'll take this, but I'll make it better on my own time. It really being enough, accepting that when somebody gives you their best, that it's enough. So when you go back to that self-talk, for me, it was realizing that I am enough. And that's a journey. It wasn't, I didn't get that at 16. I didn't have it at 26. I don't think I had it at 36. It took a while, because I was, you know, when you're more invested in the self-talk than you are in the truth of how you show up and that your best is enough, then that voice has it makes you focus on performance.
Yeah.
More than you need to. And so it comes with, you know, I've got to always do better and be better. And the flip side of that is that means that what I'm doing today is not enough. And so it was reframing, you know, that self-talk. And for me, that, you know, that's a foundational faith-based journey for me, where it's like, I am okay. And it may not be perfect, but it was the best I could do today. And so that's okay. And just honoring that. And that's really important, because you said, you know, how did you get over it? I'll be honest, I was sharing with in another conversation with a couple of friend girls who are also in this industry, and they said, well, how are you doing during this whole COVID quarantine thing? And I said, I'm going through this period of grace-filled deconstruction.
Ooh.
And one of the things that I think the quarantine at least has been for me as a gift is that it quieted a lot of the busy things that we do, whether that's work, the things that we do to medicate or satiate and keep busy, you know, to not deal with the stuff that we're hearing or the stuff in our heart. And so this quarantine time, which, can you believe it, has been 4+ months.
No, I can't believe it.
I know. And so, you know, I came into it, you know, when it's something as critical as this, such a critical event, it forces you to look at things. And so for me, one of the things I purposed in this time is I'm like, I want to spend some time in some grace-filled deconstruction. And that's whether or not it's around me tearing down and looking at the things I believe. What am I fearful of? You know, what happens if this doesn't get better real soon?
Right.
You know, how is my family? Are we safe? You know, work, you know, the part of me that as we're watching stuff happen and companies are making decisions and there are leaders, the part of me that is the doer that wants to make things better, I'm like, I've got so much that I could help and do and put out there, but is that the time for this right now?
Yeah.
And so then you couple that with everything that started happening around race and community and uncertainty, that even, you know, it forced me to continue to reconcile that. You know, I have amazing people in my life, and it's really, really easy in the midst of emotional, you know, heightened in very, very sensitive emotional times, to start putting these blanket generalities on people and people groups. And the fact of the matter is that's not the truth.
Right.
And so just making sure that, okay, I hear that there's a lot going on right now, and a lot of those things are facts. But facts change. The truth doesn't change. And so that had to become the litmus that I would put things through. It's like, okay, I'm feeling this way today, and that's a fact, right?
Yeah, the
It
fact
may
that
not
you're
be a
having
fact tomorrow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because we're taught, quite honestly, that facts don't change.
Yeah.
And that's not
No.
true. Facts do change,
Yeah.
but the truth doesn't.
Yeah.
And so choosing to deal with and sit in the truth right now, I think is critical. And when I say it's graceful deconstruction, is that it can be really, really easy to be hard on yourself and to be overly critical and to pick yourself apart.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do that with grace, then you do that with love. You
Right.
do it the same way you would with or for or to someone else. You just apply it personally, and then for me, that's where my faith came in. So it was like, okay, so I'm walking through this, and today doesn't feel real good. Okay, well, what does that look like? How do I want to come out of this differently? What things about whether it's the way that I work or the way that I'm a part of my family, the way that I support my children, the way that I support my husband, how do I want to come out of this differently? And what does that look like? And so, what conversations do I need to be having? How do I need to think about this differently? Who do I need to see differently? How do I reconcile that and do the work so that when I come out of this time, it's different for real?
What would you be comfortable sharing about what I wrote this down because it was so powerful when you said grace-filled deconstruction.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm picking up notes of like taking another look at your life, your purpose, your values. Am I living consistently with what are my values?
Mm-hmm.
Like
all of that. So if we go back to I was saying,
tell me more about that. Because Oneka, I really think that what you're talking about here so openly and vulnerably is what a lot of people are facing, whether they realize it or not. Is this is forcing them into a place of reevaluation. If you can do it, and what you have done is done it with intention. You're doing it with an open heart, open mind, and with, seeking intentionally to do it. Maybe there's someone listening who isn't really doing it with intention, but hearing you tell your story is going to help them kind of move into that intentional space and find what grace-filled looks like for them and what deconstruction looks like for them. So tell me more about what that process can be on an individual level.
Yeah, it actually came out of a conversation when, I was part of a community meeting. I was just sharing that, as people were starting, this was, several weeks ago when people were starting to talk about, okay, getting in the mindset of returning to work, returning to X, whatever that is they're returning to. And I remember telling, a friend of mine, I am more focused on what I'm not going to return to. I don't know that I necessarily have a list of things that I want to return to, but I want to start looking at the things that I don't want to go back to, that I want to do differently. And I mean, something like this, and it's like, okay, family, people are losing people.
Right.
People are losing people. People are having to think about their health in a different way. We were talking about the fact that, people are quarantined in spaces that if you're in an abusive relationship, that may not be safe. So the words, stay home and be safe may not look the same for everybody. For some people, home isn't safe.
Right.
It was the realization that for some people, there is no home. So when you say stay home, there are some people that don't have that as an option. And so we were just talking about that, and we were talking about, well, what are the next steps, and what's that next client you're going after? What's that next, body of work? And I said, I'm probably more clear now than I have been in the past about what I don't want to go back to. I'm all for helping leaders and organizations be better at being authentically caring about their people. But if it's in an unhealthy and toxic culture and they're not serious about it, I'm not the person they need to engage. If leaders aren't comfortable and willing to do the work themselves first, so that when they show up and they're doing it for real and with the right intention, I may not be the person to work with. And so it became that part, and I think I'm at that point in my life where I'm like, there will probably be more things that I say no to than I say yes to. And that was hard, right? That's hard. Realizing that, you can't fix everything. Not everything and everybody wants, or agrees that there's anything that needs to change. And so you got to be willing to move on until they are. And even when they are, it may not be with you. So
right.
Having those conversations, we also just started talking about, she said, well, what is something you think that, we're missing? I said, I don't think leaders understand the gravity of the global trauma that is coming back with people. So this was before, this was probably 6 or so weeks ago, and it felt very much canary in the mine shaft, right? Type of conversation. And I said, this is bigger than somebody sitting 6 feet away from someone.
Oh, yeah.
Because when somebody comes back into work, they are bringing all of the trauma, and we're not talking about 1 or 2 people. We're not talking about a few people.
No, we're talking about everybody.
Global trauma and PTSD on a global level.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to hear those conversations now. I'm starting to see people writing papers on them now. I'm starting to see those discussions now. But it was watching that writing on the wall 6 to 8 weeks ago, and I'm like, this is bigger than a lot of people are thinking that it's going to be. It's bigger than, open workspaces and not having offices and office doors. It is bigger than that. And realizing that a lot of, organizations have lots of managers, but they don't have a lot of leaders. And so if you're not a leader and you're not wired to, and you're not focused on the full health of the people that you lead, you'll miss those things. And so that was a concern for me. That was a concern. And so, it's like, what does that look like? And so for me, from a grace-filled deconstruction, it was really about just wanting to lay the cards on the table about what was really important and what had stopped being important. And whether people call it that or not, I think everybody is going through some level of that. We were talking about the fact that, there are people that are going to come out of this and decide, whatever it is that I'm doing today, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not healthy for me. I don't enjoy it. Yep. It produced stress in me. It was stress-filled. I did it because I was good at it, but that didn't mean that I liked it. That didn't mean that it was what I was supposed to be doing.
Right.
I think people are going to make decisions about, well, yes, I could go back to this. But it took me spending these 4 months every day in and out with my family to realize and to realign with the fact that they are priority. And I don't want to do anything or be anywhere where they're not priority anymore. And those types of answers provoke and put into action a totally different set.
Yeah.
Totally different conversation about what's important and who's important. And so I was just there, and I was there with my family, I was there with my husband, I was there with my children. And so we focused on that. And it became a bit of a cocoon for us.
Right.
And we'll emerge at some point. We're all having to. But it's, again, saying, you know what, I'm not willing to sacrifice us for this anymore.
Right. Wow.
Did that answer it?
Oh, I mean, there's just so much there to work with. I guess, I'm curious, like, how, and again, to the extent that you're comfortable sharing it, because it is deeply personal, I'm wondering what some of the unexpected, maybe some positive things that have come out of it in terms of the family dynamic. How many kids do you have, by the way, if I could ask that?
I have 3.
You have 3?
I have.
Wow.
We have one that is still at home. She's 15 and a half.
Okay.
God bless us all. She got her learner's permit last week, so
Oh,
we've got
my
a
Lord.
15-year-old driver in the house. And she has two older siblings. My son is 32, and she has a sister who's 27. So
Oh, wow.
we have pretty huge gaps. So if you ask her, she has four parents.
Oh, yeah, she would. Totally.
Two parents,
Yeah.
two parents and two siblings. She's like, everybody tells me what to do.
Is everybody in the same area, or are the other kids living far away, or where are they at?
No, not at all. They actually live not far from downtown Atlanta.
Okay.
So they're sharing a place. So they're quarantined together, and the three of us are down here. And
I see. Okay.
And so we get together, when we can, and spend time. And Sunday dinner, I cook. I'm the mom. I do mom
Okay.
stuff,
Okay.
so. Yeah, for sure.
Boy,
on top of everything else, I cook a mean plate of food on top of everything.
Do you?
Else, so.
What do you like to cook? What's your? I like to be in the kitchen too. Yeah. It's therapeutic, I think.
It is very much. One of the things that my youngest daughter and I do. We're Food Network foodies. So usually it's Saturday. We're watching and we're picking out what we're going to cook. And she has a pretty good palate. So she cooks as much as I do. So we're experimenters. I don't know that we have a favorite. Both my daughters would probably say Italian.
Italian,
My son would
okay.
definitely,
Yeah.
My son would definitely say seafood. My husband would say food.
Simpler requirements.
He doesn't have a favorite. Just good amounts of everything.
Of everything, yeah.
And I'm an experimenter. I love to bake. So one of the things that I did start doing during quarantine, I wanted to master breads and pastries.
Ooh.
The things that take time.
Tough one.
And so, yes. And so me being a New York City girl, I was craving New York bagels. And decided we're doing it. And it was so crazy. So you'll appreciate this.
Yeah.
I'm researching, okay, what's the most authentic, and I had to make sure that I had unbleached bread flour. I had to make sure that I had barley malt syrup, because that's what you have to boil them in, along with baking soda. It's just that I decided to do all of this baking at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And so, we had amazing bagels at 3 o'clock.
It worked out okay? Those are tough to make. Because you gotta don't you have to boil them, and then you bake them?
Yeah, but you have to go through a couple of different rises. You have to roll them. You have to let them set, and then you have to boil them, and then you cook them real fast. So yeah. I said, so it was like eureka at 3 o'clock in the morning. Fresh bagels.
Something very
and everybody had to get up
about it.
because they had to eat the bagels.
Well, they could smell them probably.
It's like everybody, come on.
I mean, did you even have to wake anyone up? I would imagine the smell would waft through the house and
Well, my husband has to be to work extremely early in the morning, so he was on his way out.
Okay.
And the 15-year-old was up hanging. The 15-year-old.
She's 15. I mean, that's
so she was up.
Yeah.
So she was up. But if they weren't up, I would have got them up. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Just freshen your bagels.
I went through all this trouble. You're going to eat these bagels.
We're eating bagels. We're eating bagels.
Let me just tell you what's on the agenda right now, folks. Oh, my God. I remember trying to make donuts.
I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I haven't done donuts, but I was actually looking at a beignet recipe this past weekend.
You are not afraid of hard things. Okay, I just want to say props to you. You're picking like the hardest stuff.
Well, the other stuff I've got, there's not a lot that I can't cook or that I won't try, but the breads and the yeast breads and the things, mostly because the patience and baking at that level is more science.
Yes.
You get into the creative side of it, but you can't really get into the creative side until you have mastered the science of baking. And I am a pinch and a spot measurer, and so it requires more discipline for me. Because you can't wing it with bread flour.
No.
You can't. I'll just throw in more yeast. You can't. It is much more science, and so those days when I want
you need precision consulting.
Yes.
For that one. Yeah. What is it? It's Convergence Solutions. No, we're going to bring in our partner, Precision Solutions Consulting.
Precision catering.
But you're
right?
also a math.
But,
You're a math whiz, so you've got kind of both. I feel like you walk both lines. You've kind of got that math side of you that's very precise and measurement oriented, and then the human. You are a human convergence in a sense.
For sure, and the other piece that I don't I don't share a lot. I write poetry. I've written poetry since I was very young, and so that's the other outlet. Again, we talked a little bit earlier, my love for words, and a lot of that came from writing poetry when I was really, really young. And poetry was amazing because it was an outlet. There were some things that happened when I was younger, very traumatic, but writing was my safe place, and it was where I could.
Wow.
Sometimes tell story, but it was more how do I use poetry and poems to tell story and paint pictures. And
yeah.
It was a place to put some pain that I wasn't ready to deal with.
Wow.
At a young age. So. Yeah.
Well, so what would you say to somebody who's feeling maybe the 3 or 4 months is wearing on, and it's like, what do I do now? What can I do that's meaningful for my life, my career? How do I approach? I like this sound of grace-filled deconstruction. Any tips on some meaningful steps someone could take to kind of get on their own intentional journey?
I think it really starts with gratitude and Thanksgiving. One of the things that we were really clear on was that as a family, we were very, very lucky. We are still very lucky. And we're thankful. We know of some people that have been impacted, but we've not lost anyone close to us. We don't take that lightly.
Mm-hmm.
So it really just starts with being thankful and being intentional about, in the midst of everything, what is still good? Who is still good? Who is still great? What is still important? What is still meaningful? What is still valuable? And when you start to look at it that way, the list gets pretty long. And then you realize, even in the midst of all of this, we're richly blessed. We are richly blessed.
I love that you asked who is good, because it's when you think about the people in your life, it's hard to be, you think about how grateful you are for the people in your life. And it doesn't take that many, but just a few key people. It's those are immeasurable, the value of that, particularly in difficult times, but also in good times.
Yeah, and I like the juxtaposition of grace-filled deconstruction, because when we think of something being deconstructed, we think of just rubble and being torn down. Mm-hmm. But when you handle those pieces, because everybody has broken pieces that they're either trying to put back together or get rid of, or reform, mend, and it is so much better when you do it with care. And I think that sometimes we are more intentional about doing that and giving that care or handling others with care, and we don't give that to ourselves. And so, I'm trying to be a recovering perfectionist.
Yeah.
And so part of what I've had to accept and embrace is when is it enough?
Wow.
When is it enough?
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful to get to learn from you and to walk this journey a little bit with you, and I'm really excited to see what you end up doing next. And there is I like what you didn't say this explicitly, but there is no going back. And in fact, the truth is there never is going back. We never go back. We're always moving forward.
And here's the thing: if we will be really, really honest, we don't want to go back to the way it was.
No.
Everybody thinks about things. I'll make it very practical. There were several of us that were talking. We're here in Atlanta, and so I don't know that we have Los Angeles traffic, but we have Atlanta traffic, which, rush hour could be anywhere from 4 a.m. to 10 a.m. Right?
I've seen it. It's for real.
Yeah. Noon until 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And so, it can be as transactional as, I don't want to work in a way where I'm spending 3 hours in my car a day. That's 15 hours a week where, I'm not as productive, or and that's just getting to or getting from,
Yeah.
A place of business or a place of work. How can I do it differently so that those 15 hours go back to my house, they go back to my family, they go back to me? That's very practical. Or maybe it's that, you're thinking about, again, is this the work that still gives you pleasure to do? The work that I do, I'll be the first to tell you, I didn't choose this work. I really believe that it chose me.
Yeah.
Because it's just how I'm wired. That's my heart, and that's how I serve people. Because in some instances, I wanted to be what the Monas and the Sanjis and the other people in my life gave me. But I also want to be there for people who may not have had that. Because there are times when I didn't have that. And so, it allows me to think of it that way. How do I serve?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and right now, everybody, there's a lot going on, and people are hurting. And it's like, okay, can we reframe it in terms of how we serve each other?
Yep.
I would much rather serve you and let my service change your mind about who you think I am,
right,
than to just have a conversation and think that I can change your mind that way.
Right.
I don't know that ever works.
Yeah, it generally doesn't. Yeah.
It
generally doesn't.
It
Yep.
doesn't. And
No.
so, you probably won't remember what I say, but if I change the way you feel about something,
Mm-hmm.
or I plant that seed, the chances of that reproducing are much higher. So I'd rather focus on that and finding
Yep.
out how to do that right now. And so it's forced me, as opposed to being, very, very outward and open and just let's just talk. I think sometimes you gotta wait until you've processed and you've healed a little bit so that people can hear you. That is,
Yeah.
because we've all been in a situation where somebody could be totally right about what they're saying, but when it's fraught with emotion, you lose some of the message.
Yeah.
And I think everything that everybody needs to say right now to be heard, the message is critical.
Yeah.
But it's getting lost in noise.
Yep.
And I don't want what I'm saying or what's important to be lost in noise. So I'll sit it out for a little while longer.
Don't get lost in the noise. Wow.
And there's a lot of noise. And it's,
yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard. I don't. It's hard,
Yeah.
But you got to decide that. Again, what are you willing to gracefully, let happen?
Yeah.
So that you can move forward.
Yep. Well, once again, I really appreciate this time with you and exploring who you are as a human being. I mean, we could have spent a lot of time talking about, Mona and these different other people, but I think it was, and they're wonderful, and maybe we'll do it again. But I really appreciate you kind of exploring with us what your journey's been like and how you're processing. I know that's helped me, and I'm sure it'll help others too. Graceful deconstruction.
Yeah. And that's not easy. I mean,
No.
we all have the propensity to be really, really hard on ourselves.
Oh yeah.
And so I've had to stand down on that.
Yeah.
A lot. And so I can only imagine, what that's like for everyone else.
The grace starts with yourself, and then
Man, does it.
then
does it.
What did somebody say? You can't give what you don't have,
And it's so funny. I was literally thinking about that. I had a situation with a client a couple of years ago who was quite racist, honestly.
Oh.
I had some really challenging conversations and confrontations with this person. And I remember having a conversation with my husband, and I'm like, I don't know if this is going to work out.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And my husband's like, well, we need to pray for him. And I was like, okay, well, you can hold that down. You can do that.
Wow.
And he said, well, for him to be spitting that much venom at you, he's got to be really broken.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember thinking that day, and in my private time, saying and hearing You know, if you've been extended, if you've been given grace and you've experienced grace, you can extend grace because you know how important it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to walk out and exercise what it's like to extend somebody grace.
Yeah.
In that situation. And I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that I did. You know, if you've ever needed grace and experienced it, you can extend it. And so I think this is just an extension of that for me.
Wow. Well, it's been a blessing spending some time with you, Oneka, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. And I'm looking forward to eating with you somewhere, hopefully Atlanta, before too long.
That would be good. I was gonna say I could send you bagels, but I don't know that you want a New York bagel by way of Atlanta all the way. So
No.
Just
no. We'll come do the real thing. Yeah. Thank you so much.